Imagine being able to take a completely ordinary ring and slipping it through your fingers. Let's take it a step further. If you've ever lost a ring before, say from a long night of drinking, or maybe washing your hands and it falls down the sink, or maybe you're delivering a child, bringing it into this beautiful world that we live in, then you understand how frustrating it can be tracking it down. I tried to figure out what it was, how I was losing so many rings. I thought it was just that it was slipping off because it was too big, but I had the ring fitted. That didn't really make sense. But I sorted it out. It's that the ring is actually slipping through my fingers. It wasn't slipping off at all. You probably couldn't see that very well. It said it slips through, not off my fingers. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. That's not the problem. It's when it makes its way to the pinky that it's definitely going to slip off. It's just too loose. So if you have any tips on how I can stop losing so many of these, I'm all ears. Hey guys, my name is Heath and I want to welcome you to Circuit. Thank you first and foremost for taking interest in what I do. It really means a lot to me. But Circuit is a highly visual routine where a ring is seen to be pulled through your fingers one at a time, and then you repeat it again without cover of any kind, and it can be performed completely surrounded and is impromptu. It can even be done with a spectator's ring. So there's a lot going for the routine in that regard. Circuit was created a couple years ago when I was in Vegas, and it was nothing more than a happy accident, which a lot of good magic actually starts that way. But what I was doing is I was just fiddling with the ring, and it slipped off of my finger and started its way back onto the middle finger. And had I not noticed it, it might have not gotten to where it is today, but I explored it to its lengths, and now we have what you have just seen. So in addition to Circuit, there's a lot of other good ring magic out there, most notably Garrett Thomas's The Ring Thing. If you don't have this already, I can't recommend anything else as much as I can recommend this. There's a lot of tips and techniques on this DVD that play nicely with Circuit. So if you master Circuit and what's on here, you'll have more than enough magic to perform with just the ring on your finger. So without further ado, let's get into the secrets of Circuit. Before we jump into the basic principle of Circuit, I wanted to talk about a few things that, while not critical, are going to make learning the dance a little more palatable for you. Most of all, you're going to need to learn how to be keen to the amount of moisture on your hands. If your hands are tacky or sweaty, it's going to make performing the routine difficult, if not completely impossible. But there are a few ways you can deal with that are readily available. First is washing your hands. Really simple, and I think a sink is pretty much in every household. So just scrub your hands with some water and soap, give them a little time to dry, and if you've got a chance, do a quick test run of the routine just to make sure everything's on the up and up before throwing down. Second, you can use hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer works really well. It's portable. You squirt a little bit in your hands and rub it all over, and it'll take the oil and tackiness away from your hands. It's got like an alcohol in it, so it dries pretty quickly. The best thing by far to use is talcum powder. Now, I use just this little pouch of talcum powder, or you could put some white talcum powder in a little baggie, but that's frowned upon by some people. With this, you just pat it on your hands a little bit, and if you've got like some tackiness, completely eliminates it. So everything works real smoothly after that. So now that we've tackled that, let's take a look at circuit. The novel thing about circuit is that instead of using heavy sleight of hand, you're merely using the momentum of the ring to move it around from finger to finger. And what's actually happening is the ring is traveling around from finger to finger just by using its inertia. By dropping the hand slightly, you're moving it from finger to finger, but fast enough that it's not being perceived by the audience. Now, in the closed phase, where you're apparently pulling the ring through your fingers, all you're doing is using the weight of the ring again to drop the ring off on your thumb before transferring it to your pinky, getting you 3 steps ahead for the penetration through your fingers. So what that looks like is this. And that leads into the visual phase where you're actually openly making the ring jump from finger to finger. All right, let's get into the finer details that make circuit work. First, I want to talk about just the general position of your hand that you'll be returning to frequently in the routine. Now, it doesn't apply to the closed phase of circuit, but whenever you're doing the open phase, you're going to be returning to this in between each jump from finger to finger. Now, at first glance, it looks like you're just generally holding your hand out there, but there are some points that you need to remember in order to give you the best chance for success. Mostly relaxed. Your hand needs to be relaxed. You don't want a lot of tension in your hand or it to look like you have rheumatoid arthritis or something like that. So just relax your hand with it slightly cupped, like you're holding a softball, and with your fingers slightly separated, just like this. I mean, like you would display a ring to someone. Hey, check this out. That's just fine. And you're going to come to this position after every jump, and you'll be in this position before every jump. So study it and get it burnt into your mind before we get into the open phase. Let's first talk about what makes the closed phase of circuit work. As I said before, what you're doing is dropping the ring off onto your thumb, where it stays briefly before being dropped back onto your pinky. And this happens under the guise of displaying the finger and coming up and pushing the ring all the way to the base of the index. So again, from here, your right hand displays the ring, and using gravity, as it comes up to be pushed to the base of the finger, you're dropping it off onto the thumb. Now, this happens behind the left hand, and then dropping it onto the pinky as the index finger comes into view over the left hand. So that's generally the timing in slow motion. As soon as the right hand comes behind the left hand, the ring is dropped off onto the thumb, and then as soon as the right hand's pinky is obscured from view with the left hand, the ring is transferred to the pinky, and then you grip the index finger as if you're holding the ring and feign a little bit of resistance as you push it to the base of the finger, but don't overdo it. I mean, you really don't have to ham it up on that part. So from there, you're 3 steps ahead in doing the penetrations through each of the fingers. All you have to do is just open your hand, or lift your left thumb out of the way, and then close it back on top of where the ring should be, or is apparently in the spectator's mind. Then again, you feign a little bit of resistance as you appear to pull it through each of the fingers, ending on the pinky, and then you can open your hands and display the ring. Now, if you don't like pulling through all of the fingers, you can do a slight variation on it. So you start the same and drop the ring off onto the pinky, and from here, instead of pulling it through all of your fingers, you mime the action of pulling it out and through your index finger, and then placing it back onto your pinky. And all you're doing there to get that illusion of it breaking through your finger is using your thumb of your left hand and applying a little pressure on that index finger and letting it slip off. So you get this nice illusion of the finger ring breaking through the index. And then coming down and reversing that, now you're pressing on the index, or pressing on the back of the left thumb with your pinky and letting it slip off, and it looks like you pushed it through the pinky and back onto it. So you have to be a little more conscious of your angles when doing it that way, because it opens it up a lot more. From here, you'll need to make sure that your extreme left and right don't have any audience members in it. They need to be in front of you so that they don't see that you don't actually have a ring here. So that's generally how the closed phase works. All right, now that we've given you a brief introduction to what makes circuit work and covered some of the tips that will make it a more successful and palatable experience for you, it's time to bring the pain. This is going to be the knacky portion, the open phase, where you, without any cover, make the ring jump between your fingers. So the basic structure of the routine is that we go from our index finger to the middle, then down to our ring, back up to the middle finger before skipping the ring finger and going down to the pinky. Now, you're going to want to put your hand in that relaxed position that we talked about earlier, with your fingers slightly separated, your hand completely relaxed, and the ring is sitting loosely on the knuckle, on the lowermost knuckle of your index finger. You should be able to kind of wiggle the ring back and forth. That's how you know it's about as loose as it needs to be. If not, you can adjust it with your thumb a little bit until it's sitting in the right spot. So from here, you're going to open your fingers back up so that all of your fingertips are pretty close together. They should be generally in a line and separated only by a fraction of an inch. Now, the adjustment that you have to make from this position to affect the jump of the ring from the index to the middle is just lightly touching the index to the side of the middle finger. You don't want to piggyback like this. That's a common mistake. You don't want to piggyback. You just want to lightly touch the side of the index finger to the side of the middle finger. Now, once you've done that, you just drop your hand about 2 to 3 inches. You're going to hold your hand at about chest height, about a foot away from you, and drop your hand about 2 to 3 inches. So again, starting with a slight separation between those fingers, you briefly touch, drop your hand 2 to 3 inches, and then relax the hand again. If you get a hang up where it's kind of sitting up like this, it's not a huge deal. You can just quickly adjust it with your thumb. Now when it comes down onto the middle finger, you want it sitting just above that lowermost knuckle again, where it's slightly loose. You want it to sit there like that because you want it loose enough that you'll be able to break it, loosen that knuckle again and get it onto the next finger. So again, holding it about a foot out from your chest at chest height, relax the hand, lightly touch the sides of those fingers together, drop about 2 to 3 inches, and it should come around and on to the middle finger. Now, what you're doing, I mean, I'm describing it like it's fairly easy, but it is a very knacky thing to do. But I promise you, it's something that you'll start to catch on to, and the more you practice it, obviously, it's going to get easier. But you're trying to pull your finger out of the ring and leave it in place, if you can envision it that way. Kind of like you pull a tablecloth out from under, a table setting. So you want to imagine trying to pull that finger out and leave that ring in place, kind of like that. But if you've got these fingers touching, it creates a path for that ring to follow. And the momentum of that ring will carry it to the end of the finger where it hits that point where they contact and down around onto the middle finger. So that's the basic principle, and that's the adjustments you have to make for the first part of the open phase. Next, we'll take a look at going from your middle to your ring finger and back. Now that we've gotten from the index to the middle finger, let's take a look at what's probably the knackiest portion of the routine. And that's getting from the middle finger down to the ring finger. Now, the reason I say that it's probably going to be the most uncomfortable is because you'll have to train your fingers to get into this preposterously uncomfortable looking configuration. All you're really doing is just touching the tip of your middle finger to the tip of your ring finger and opening them just like that. At first, when you try, you're not going to be able to get much, if any, movement at all out of them. You'll just sit there and concentrate. But eventually, you'll get them to start opening up a little bit. You'll need this clearance between the two fingers so that that ring can travel around and onto the ring finger. So from that relaxed starting position, you're just going to touch the tips of those two fingers together, widen this opening here slightly, and then drop your fingers, or drop your hand about 2 to 3 inches to get it to go around and onto that ring finger. Now to get back to the middle finger, you're going to have to fight gravity. It's the only part of the routine where the ring has to go up against gravity. So it takes a little more persuasion, and to get it up there, you're going to do the same dropping action, but your inclination will be to kind of flick the wrist to get the ring up there. You want to avoid it as much as possible, but when you're first learning, it'll be probably completely unavoidable. To get it up there at all, you'll need to kind of kick your wrist up that way, just to beat gravity. But as you get better at it, you want to minimize that so that you have this uniformity of action through all of the phases, so that all of them generally look the same. So there are a couple ways you can kind of fight that telltale sign that you're throwing the ring up, and that's by using kind of a gesturing action. Like if you're doing the routine from more of a misdirection standpoint, you can go from the first to the middle finger and then gesture out to someone, say, "Did you see that?" And as you gesture, you've actually gone from the middle finger to the ring finger under this natural action of pointing out to someone. So that'll get it down to the ring finger using a casual action, so people won't be putting a lot of heat on this when the move happens. And as a follow-up, you can say, sometimes I don't even see it myself, as you gesture outwards like this, kind of a shrugging action, and that'll get it back onto the middle finger, and you can use that, cocking of the wrist, but it's covered by this natural gesture of, I don't even see it myself sometimes. So that's one way you can kind of hide that telltale action needed to get that ring back up there. So next, we'll take a look at getting the ring from the middle finger down to the pinky. All right, we're in the home stretch now. All we have to do is get the ring from the middle finger down to the pinky. Now, this is going to take a little bit of contortion, but it won't be nearly as bad as the previous phase. You're going to have to touch the tip of the middle finger to the tip of the pinky without making it look like you're throwing up a gang sign. This is your goal. So once you've got those fingers touching, again, you're going to start in this same relaxed position, and almost as you're starting the drop, you're going to want a little motion in the hand before you touch those fingers together. You're kind of using the larger action covers the smaller action to mask this move, this reaching of the middle finger. So as the drop starts, it's that same drop of about 2 to 3 inches. Once it's begun, the instant it starts, you're going to touch the middle to the pinky, and then that ring should break loose and follow that path around and down onto the pinky. This is what it should look like. Now, you're going to get, inevitably, some fingers poking out here, and if they're watching you closely, they'll see that and might suspect that you are, reaching over or somehow getting it or dumping the ring off from one finger onto another. So there's a couple ways you can combat that. One is, and this is what I use most of the time, is just to go into a fist. Once you've got that ring across, you immediately close it into a fist. And not only does that kind of cover this reaching action, it also makes it seem a little bit more impossible that anything could be happening. I mean, they might not even realize that it's on the pinky until after the fist is closed, which makes for a really impossible penetration of the ring. You've not only skipped the finger, but it's also inexplicably happened while the fist is closed. So another way you can mask that action is by kind of doing this jazz hands, I don't know. I don't even know what it's called, but sparkly hand thing that a lot of the stage magicians do. It's a little bit harder and it takes a little more practice, but you can kind of do it when, once you've got the ring across, then you can kind of flutter your fingers a little bit. I don't think it's as good or as strong as going straight into the fist or just trying to get away with it, head on without any covering action, but it's there for your consideration. So now we'll take a look at some of the variations on the routine and some other tips that can help you on your walk with circuit. All right, now let's take a look at some of the things you'll need to pay attention to when borrowing a ring from a spectator. As I said before, it can be done with a spectator's ring, but you'll need to look at some of the qualities of the ring before you borrow it. Mostly the size. You're going to want it pretty close to your actual ring size. So looking at people's hands, you should be able to get a pretty good idea and estimate the size of the ring and whether it's within a half size or a size. That's kind of where you want to be. So once you've determined that it's pretty close to your size, you're also going to want it to be a band style ring, like a wedding band. which there's plenty of those around, so you shouldn't have any trouble tracking one of them down. You don't want to rock on it because throughout the routine, the ring is actually changing orientation, meaning it's also kind of rotating this way as it goes from finger to finger. So if you've got this huge rock on it, like a class ring or some, 3-carat wedding ring, then they're going to see this rock jumping around as it goes from finger to finger, which puts the scent of method in the air, and that's a very foul odor to have around. So you've got the right size and a wedding style band. Another thing you'll want to pay attention to is the width of the band. You'll want to keep it about the same as this. It can be a little wider and it can definitely be narrower. Narrower is going to make it easier for the ring to get around, but it'll also be a little bit lighter since there's less ring to the ring. Now it can be done with wider rings too. They're heavier and the ring gets around faster, but the wider the ring, the more clearance you need to get that ring to make it over that joint. It's a little bit harder, and I can't guarantee success every time, but if you practice with a wider ring, eventually you'll be able to get it to do the same thing that this ring does. So now that we've looked at what you need to be paying attention to when selecting a spectator's ring to borrow, we'll look at some variations on circuit that you might find some merit in. All right, I want to talk about a variation on an effect in Garrett Thomas's Ring Thing DVD that is a variation on an effect from Martin Gardner Presents, which is a book by Martin Gardner. The effect in that book is called The Jumping Cigar Bands, and it uses cigar bands. Garrett Thomas thought to use finger rings because it makes a little more sense and it just looks better in general, looks more elegant. Now, using the technique and circuit, you can do a legitimate performance of the effect that Garrett Thomas's variation achieves. Now, Garrett Thomas's variation on the jumping cigar bands is just that you've got the ring on your middle finger and it's jumping from finger to finger, apparently. Now, if you get caught in that action, or if you want to use it as like a method canceller, you can use the technique and circuit to do the same thing but legitimately. So you've got that ring on your index finger instead, and you'll make it jump to your middle finger. Going back is a little tricky, and I wouldn't even recommend it because it's a strange action. It's not to say it can't be done, so by all means go for it, but you're not going to want to do this more than a couple times, if that. So again, you're going to just do that same action of using gravity to drop that off onto the middle finger and kind of flicking it back up onto the middle finger as you come down onto your wrist. You don't have to use your wrist, but it's kind of a nice stage for the effect. Just like that. So that's it. I hope you've gotten something out of this DVD that you can use, and I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. All right, so you're hanging out with your friends at a bar and living the single life. Life is good. And all of a sudden you're ambushed by a less than stunning heifer, portly, large, like a 2.5, maybe 3, or 3.5 if photoshopped, but definitely not your caliber woman. And you've got your ring on your middle finger. You'd like it to be on that ring finger, wouldn't you? You'd like her to think that you're already taken and leave you alone. So what do? You say, oh, well, who sent you over here? Did my friend send you? Because as you can see, I'm clearly married. But it was nice to meet you. Have a good night. This is the Wingman. Once again, guys, I want to thank you so much for taking interest in my magic. It was unexpected that I'd be doing a project, or that I would have people like you taking a look at something that I'd been working on. So flattering to say the least. And again, thank you. Don't get frustrated if you don't get the routine down at first. As I said, it's a knacky thing, and even if it's not hitting and you do it 100 times, don't let that get to you. Eventually it'll hit, and you'll start to tune into the little nuances that make it work. And if you are having trouble with it, just remember to keep your hands relaxed, use light contact between the fingers, and just stick with it. You know, work on it a few minutes here and there every day, and eventually you'll start getting some consistency in the routine. And once you do, you'll have a strong piece of magic that you can perform anytime and anywhere, and hopefully it serves you well. So again, thank you so much for taking a look.